Hi, I'm Amanda Morgan, and this is Not Just Cute, the podcast, where we discuss all kinds of topics to help bridge the gap that exists between what we know and what we do in early childhood education. We're starting conversations with academics, authors, decision makers, educators, and parents so that together we can improve the quality of early childhood education, while at the same time protecting and respecting the childhood experience. 1 year ago, Allison McDonald was teaching preschool in the state of Washington and writing her popular blog, No Time for Flashcards. When the pandemic hit, her class was suddenly canceled, as it was for so many other teachers, and the world shut down. After the initial shock, her school began talking about how they could safely move forward and continue serving children and families. Allie was fielding similar questions from teachers in her online world as well. Over the past year, she's been innovating to serve her own students while also supporting teachers around the globe during this unique and challenging period. Through it all, she's not only discovered tips and concepts to help teachers through a pandemic, but she's also identified key questions that we can all use to guide us now and as we move forward. As I'm recording this intro, Allie has just started her first full week back in the physical classroom. She never stopped teaching, though, and she never stopped learning either. In this episode, she'll share some of those new perspectives and principles she picked up through this challenging year that will continue to be valid as the preschool world navigates through different versions of a new normal. Before we begin, I wanted to let you know that I recently released a free mini course covering 5 keys to intentional whole child development. If you'd like to learn more about how to implement and advocate for developmentally appropriate, responsive early education, sign up for this free course in today's show notes. You can find those show notes for this episode at notjustcute.com/podcast/episode 41. Many of you are back in the classroom. Some of you are still remote, and some of you are working in a hybrid combination situation. If you're curious about what's been working for others doing remote teaching in early childhood environments, or wondering if there are any lessons that we need to take with us back into the physical classroom, you are in the right place. Let's jump in. Allie, thanks for joining us again. You have been so generous on social media sharing what you're doing with remote teaching, and I'm really excited to give people who maybe haven't seen that some of the insight today on how you have approached remote teaching, because I think you take a really special perspective to it.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about what preschool looked like to you in your teaching before March 2020 and what it's looking like for you now.
So before March 2020, I was teaching the 2.5 to 3.5-year-old class at my preschool. It was 2 days a week, and for two hours, I forget now. Yes, 2 hours. It was a really fun, emergent curriculum class. We would do all the, regular stuff. I was lucky in the sense that my students often came pretty prepared for school. So even at a young age, we could do some pretty fun learning activities. But it was just, I would say your average preschool class, hopefully with, above average teachers, because right. I think my co-teacher and I are pretty rad. But it was just, we played outside, lots of free choice activities. I would be setting up a lot of hands-on activities every day. I really focused on my students. I had all boys last year.
That's right.
I had no girls in my class. And we had so much fun. A lot of laying down and playing cars, like laying down on my belly and playing with them on the rug. And do you know what? I put on a jacket I haven't worn since March. And today, and I put my hand in the pocket and I have rocks in my pocket for my students.
That's so sweet.
It's so sweet. So that's how it was. It was so individually focused. I was lucky. It was a small class. I think I only had 6 or 7 last year. My class for that age was capped at 8. And I know we weren't full. So
it's
it was
a private
6 or 7.
Preschool, right?
It is a private preschool. It's a church-run preschool. And so it was just, I was loving that year so much. And we really just got to do whatever they were interested in. And I would work in kind of my goals for them through that. And then we were shut down. And being in Washington State, we were shut down a lot earlier than a lot of other places. And we were shut down much stricter too. Mm-hmm. So we moved online, and I would record some read alouds for them, but that was really it. You know, when we first shut down and we thought we'd be open again, I made them this PDF file of all their friends and pictures so they could stay connected. And I would record videos of me singing sometimes and send them. Everything was optional. No one had to do anything. And that's kind of how the year ended. It was just me sending out videos and saying hi and trying to stay connected, hoping at some point we would be able to have like a picnic at the end of the year.
Right.
Of course, that didn't happen. So in the summer, our school was trying to decide what we were going to do. And in general, our community is very locked down. We're very compliant. We've had very low numbers in our area until recently. And but even with low numbers, everyone's been very conservative, I would say.
Very cautious.
You know, very cautious. And so we decided to do online. And I remember getting a text from my boss being like, how would you even do that? And I was like, hold up. Hold up. I just suggested something to a reader. Let me find it for you. And then, of course, I worked on it. Instead of just sending her what I had suggested to a reader, I ended up creating a whole plan. And the way that our school works now is we are all remote. We do have a play group that we started, but that is kind of an extra add-on. We kind of look at it like a buffet. Like, what can our families take from this?
Oh, I like that.
Some families need in person for an hour and a half, and that's all outside. Some families have, you know, compromised family members. They want to only be remote. That's great too. So I head up the remote. And so I have a multi-age class. It was anyone who wanted to do remote was invited to do it. And, we had a lot of families that are just not doing anything. We have other families that went to childcare centers because they needed the childcare. Mm-hmm. And so we understand that. But our remote program, the way it works is we have 2 Zooms a week, and they're about 20 to 25 minutes. They are now almost 25 minutes. They started at like 18 to 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. And the children are on Zoom with me, and it's essentially our large group time or our circle time.
Right.
Where I introduce a letter sound every week. We do that in a playful way with we have a mascot, a puppet, and he is showing them everything he's found on a hunt. And then later in the week, they go on a hunt, and then they bring it for show and tell.
Oh, I love that.
And then I always read a book, and one thing, I'll get into that in a second. Let me tell you the structure. So I read a book, and we usually do some activity, and it might be, you know, a movement activity. It might be a hands-on activity. Like yesterday, we made moons together with paint. And then after those 2 Zooms, they also have 2 recorded read alouds and about 10 activities per week that are sent home with instructions. So it's a lot of planning. And then my pre-K students, so the kids that the parents are planning on putting them in kindergarten next year, have a small group on Fridays. And it's about 15 minutes long. It's pretty short. It's what a small group would look like essentially in a classroom.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of stuff where they have materials and I have materials. And we really try and make as many of the activities hands-on, even though it's over Zoom. So a lot of Play-Doh. We do a lot of Play-Doh.
And
a lot of Play-Doh. You can do so much with Play-Doh.
And you pre-package all of those supplies and get those to the families ahead of time so that they have the same things in their hands with you at the same time. Is that how you do that?
Yep, absolutely. So we will pre-package them every week. Every 2 to 3 weeks they pick up, but we have them all separated with weeks. We send them paint. We send them, at the start of the year, they got a master bag that had Play-Doh, like glue, things that they use over and over again, including a cookie sheet, because we use that cookie sheet for a lot.
Right.
They all have a cookie sheet. So if I want to send home magnetic activities, if I want to send home anything, I tell them, get your cookie sheet. That's your messy space. So today, my students had the cookie sheet we were cutting Play-Doh today, so I could see how their cutting is. So it's a lot of like tricky ways of assessing over Zoom, basically.
Right, for sure.
And looking at their faces and realizing, okay, who just doesn't like looking at the camera because it's too much for them, but they're still engaged. Mm-hmm. Who is going to be my chatty Cathy? Who it's the same as Circle. It's just a little different. You can mute them. I mean, I don't often mute them. Yesterday, I had to mute someone because a ukulele was brought for letter U sharing. I was like, go for it. Play it for a bit. But when I tell you stop, it needs to be off. Well, it wasn't. So I muted.
It's just easier.
Exactly. And during read alouds, I do often mute them and it's not the children, it's the background noise that is so much. So that's really how our preschool has been structured. We send home a lot of things. Yeah. A lot of things. And I make a lot of printable materials, but they're not worksheets. Right. I would say the closest thing to a worksheet that I've sent home is probably this week. I sent home a printable that had a jar and then felt hearts. And I said, how many hearts can you fill in the jar? And they have to fill up the sheet with the hearts and then count them. Mm-hmm. And, that's as close to a worksheet as I'm comfortable with. Yeah. Like they still have to hold the felt hearts. They still have to place them down. They're still counting, but I can't send home 12 mason jars and enough felt hearts to fill them.
Right.
Whereas I would have one jar at free choice and they would rotate. Well, we can't rotate right now. So those are the kind of changes that are not always easy when you're used to doing it a certain way. Mm-hmm. But you have to look at what's my goal? What is my goal for this? And how can I do this in the most child-centered way?
And I love that guiding question because I think that's really it helps not just in this change, but really in anything that you're approaching in the classroom. But I think with this change in particular, it was really challenging for a lot of people to feel like they're being asked to do something that's so different from not only how they're used to teaching, but what they feel really strongly is the right way to teach, to be very hands-on and process oriented. And I know that you're one of those people, right? I know as a teacher, you're very hands-on and developmentally appropriate. And so for people like you, I think it was a big challenge to say, wait, how do I teach in this, with these restrictions that feel so antithetical to that? And I think your guiding question is so key to that. How can I do this and still keep that main goal? I think that to have that main question of how can I do this to meet that main goal, and we can change and adapt to all the other things and still be in keeping with that. So for you, are there any other tips that have helped you to mentally approach the task? Because there's the actual task of doing it, of teaching remotely, but there's the mental task of just shifting what it all looks like. Can you describe any more of that, of how you approach that? I think your guiding question is a big part of that. How can I do that? And still, I think I'm going to not word it as well as you did. How can I approach this and still keep it responsive and developmentally appropriate? Are there any other shifts that you had mentally or things that helped you to make that shift and keep that main goal still at the center?
I think really it was just a matter of looking at it as a problem to solve. Mm-hmm. Like just here are my families. What strengths do they have? How can I fill in the gaps? And how can I think part of it, honestly, is realizing what your boundaries are too. Mm-hmm. Like realizing this isn't the way it's going to be all the time.
Yes.
I get asked all the time from people on Instagram, can my child join your virtual preschool? And I say, no, because it's not a virtual preschool. It is a preschool that is temporarily remote. And it is only existing families that can come pick up materials and that I can go visit. That's the other thing. I visit my students and read them stories on their porch. Mm-hmm. That's one way that I can see the child. I can see whether or not they're following while I read. I can assess them at least on one little thing. I can ask very tricky questions to make sure that I'm, not tricky in the sense of hard, but tricky in the sense of, oh, look at that. I see your shoe. Did you get your shoes on yourself?
Right.
Yes, I did. Oh, good. I'm glad you have that skill. So, wow, look at that. How do you zip your zipper? It's ways of doing that in a really playful.
Yeah, getting to those authentic assessments. That
yes,
you can do.
Exactly. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. It was authentic. But I think for teachers who have to do this, I think the other thing is I approached it wanting to do it. I looked at it as a professional challenge and I wanted to do it. And I knew that I had a backing of an incredible group of coworkers, and I wouldn't say unlimited budget. But that's not my first concern. The church that, supports our school basically said, we want to serve these families. And we have done that in the sense of everything we've done this year has been with the families in mind of how can we serve them? How are we best serving these students and their families? Because if we're serving the parents as well, the child is getting the benefit from that.
So much.
So
and I think that's a key thing to keep in mind is not just how can I do this so that it's as close to how I did it before as possible, but stepping back and saying, what do these children and what do their families need right now? And how can we address that best given whatever constructs, whatever situation we have, and knowing that that's not going to look the same for every teacher, or for every classroom, or for every instance, right? Because we're all working with different parameters and with different families that need different things. And so I love that that's your center that you work from.
Well, I think that's part of it is just the fact these students don't need the same thing that the pre-K students last year needed. Mm-hmm. They need different things. We're in a completely different situation. And so, sometimes like yesterday, we sang happy birthday to a parent over Zoom. Well, do you know what? Like we need that. We need to have some normalcy.
Yeah.
Like it's normal to sing happy birthday to someone.
Right.
It's normal. And it's just about connection. Mm-hmm. And, that child felt the connection to tell me that it was their parent's birthday. And the parent felt connection enough to say, hey, guys, thank you.
Right.
And the other kids were singing along. It was just, I think the thing is that if we start by looking at each child, then the rest falls in place. Because even though I set up this program without specific children in mind, I had the general community needs in mind. And then I was able to shift it. And luckily, this is a curriculum I'm following. I write it every month.
Right.
And so as much time as that takes, and let me tell you, it takes a lot of time, I'm able to shift it. I know that this child is not interested in letters yet. That's fine. But I know that child is getting close to needing sight words. So what activity can I do that I can send home that I can easily put colors on it for this child if it's like some sort of matching or hunt or something, and I can do sight words for that child. And so, being able to differentiate even the sent home materials is really important. And I don't think every classroom that's really feasible.
Right.
So I think that knowing what your boundaries are and being okay with doing your best within your boundaries, like there are some things I would love to do that I know I'm like, oh, that's unrealistic. I'm not doing that. I can't do that. But even if I had considerably stricter or more constrained boundaries, I think that just accepting that this is not the way it's always going to be and doing your best to meet each child where they're at is kind of a good place to start.
I think that's so wise. And I think it's important, especially because you, like I mentioned, you've been so generous to share what you're doing and even lesson plans and ideas and resources so that, like you said, you're putting tons of time into this planning and preparing, and you've been really generous to share the fruit of that labor with other people. And I think you bring a great reminder that at the same time, everybody has to individually look at it and say, first of all, is this the right thing for the children that I'm teaching? Because you can't plan and prepare for every single person in the world, but you can share what you're doing for your children. And so teachers taking that information maybe have to make changes or even not use things that don't meet the needs of their children, but also for teachers to not get caught up in that comparison game, that they can look at it and say,
yeah,
that is so great for Allie's program. It will not work in my program, or I don't have, it just isn't going to meet the same boundaries or the same. And I think that's so important for us to keep in mind as professionals, not only that we need to make those changes or exceptions, or just, to look at them through the glasses, not only of what do our children need? So, good for you, but maybe isn't going to work in my program. And it's not right or wrong, right? It's right for your classroom and not right for my classroom, but also to not compare ourselves, because we're all just doing the best that we can within the environments and the challenges that we are each working with.
Exactly. I think that comes with time and confidence in your ability to teach. Being able to say, like, that's such a great idea, it's not going to work.
I think that's a constant as well that, is so true right now, but it really at its core is a principle of developmentally appropriate practice, right? Is being able to say, how can I be responsive to the children right here? How can I be responsive to the context right here?
Oh, absolutely. Like, even just things like I've been sending my small group of pre-K students these giant name tags for them to write their name on, because I want them to start working on writing their name. And that has been hard. Trying to help students learn to do something physical like that remotely is very tricky. Mm-hmm. Facts, even letter sounds, things like that, much easier. And actually, even we were discussing months ago, even if we went back to in person, we would still want some remote, because we want face time, especially when learning phonics. Like, I don't know that I could teach phonics with a mask on. I know that so much of it is sound, but the children also need to see how my mouth is moving. Mm-hmm. And so, and just things like, and students don't talk as much when they have masks on either.
Right.
And, kids need to talk to each other to learn. And so it's, that's something we've been trying to encourage is, wear your mask and show your children that you're talking with your mask on, mm-hmm. that it's not just, it's not a gag.
Yeah.
It's just a mask. And so, but I think the whole thing with, trying to get kids to do, like, I was doing cutting today in small group with Play-Doh and scissors, and looking at their hands. It feels like when you're called out over Zoom, it's more of a call out versus if I was noticing a child holding their scissors upside down, the way that little kids love to do. So their thumbs
right.
weren't up, if I saw that in person, I would gently come over and show them how I'm doing it. I'm like, can you do it that way? How about, can you put your thumbs up? And so even saying thumbs up, it's like, it's up for a second and down.
Yeah.
And, trying to assess that over Zoom isn't hard, but trying to address it over Zoom can be tricky. And then what do you share with parents so it gets addressed, but how many things do you choose to address?
Yeah.
So the parents aren't stressed out either. You don't want, they will likely get there with scissors. Just keep letting them play with them. Keep modeling that it's right. Mm-hmm. And then things like writing their names on that sheet. My students were all over the place. I had some students completely writing it and some it was scribbles. And I said, listen, we need those scribbles. Those scribbles are important. That's a developmental step. Please, I say all the time, if they're on different activities, have your child write it. It's not going to look like a 7 that you write. It's okay. We need them to write it. Just if it's like, total scratches, that's great. That is how a 4-year-old writes. That is how a 5-year-old writes. Mm-hmm. That's part of the process. So I think this year has been a lot of trying to educate parents without overwhelming them, because we need them to partner about certain things. And, really when I look at pre-K, what do I want my students leaving here with? As much letter sound knowledge as they are ready for, as much letter recognition as they are ready for, as much one-to-one correspondence, and recognizing their name in print and, at least attempting to write their name in as, clear form as possible, because that is what's going to be expected of them. And I'm not going to drill any of those things but trying to make sure that those things are met along with all the self-help skills that will help them be successful in kindergarten. It's tricky over Zoom. It just is. And I think we need to, what I tell myself all the time is, do you know what? In any year, there would be children completely ready on paper and some students that aren't. And as long as I'm working on those things in a child-centered way, then I'm doing my job. And doing that in a child-centered way this year looks very different. Mm-hmm. And we don't have to push them.
Yeah.
Because that is not going to help. And we don't need to stress out about it. That's not going to help. We need to continue to offer them the buffet and hope that they take a good amount of stuff, not just the Jell-O, you know?
Right.
That was always me. I was always like, Mom, look, I got a whole plate. And she's like, Allison, that's all Jell-O. I'm like, I know, I'm going to eat the Jell-O.
There's so many kinds of Jell-O.
I know. I'm like, look, they had green. You never make green Jell-O, Mom.
Well, and I love, as you talk about that buffet, I think you've hit on some really important things for a lot of teachers who, you know, may be all remote or in a hybrid or moving from one to the other, or maybe they're completely in person. And I think you brought up some things that, those different components, that there's that even when you are able to move back into the in-person, it's recognizing, you know, that, like you said, that maybe we still need a remote component so that they can see my mouth, because there are some things that we need to have that FaceTime, like you said, that we need to actually see the full face. And I had not really thought about that before, that you might still need, even though you're able to be 100% in person, that mask still creates something you may need to be having some kind of compensation for, right? And so,
right.
So I think you did a really good job of addressing that, you know, whichever situation you're in, to stop and say, what do we still need? So if it's all remote, like you mentioned, we still need the social components. We still need some of that physical component. How do we overcome those challenges? And I think your Playdate outdoors idea is a brilliant way to add that to the smorgasbord that you're offering there. But then I love too that you mentioned, so there's the, you know, the FaceTime that you get with remote, there's the social that you can get in person and more of the large motor and those types of things. But then also that parent education component. And it sounds like that's something that I know you're very aware of. And I've heard other teachers mention has been a side benefit of this, that they're able to educate parents a lot more than maybe they did in the past, either because they're there in the room next to their child or because they need to send these activities. And so they're able, you know, before maybe the parents saw these activities come home and they're like, that's cute, that's fun. But now they have the full explanation of, here's how you do it, here's why you do it this way, and here's what we're actually supporting. And that parent communication and education piece can be really powerful and a great benefit that maybe we didn't know we were getting out of all of this.
And that's the thing too, is that I've got, you know, kids, sometimes older siblings join us. And then we also have parents, usually either right next to them, just off camera, some on camera, and some, you know, working in the same room. But I will often say things like, okay, guys, get your Play-Doh. Let's squish it. We're building our hands stronger so we can learn to write. So I sneak those things in so parents can hear it. I do things like when I read, of course, I always say, like, this is the author's name. This is the illustrator. Now, what is this? You're right, it's the title. And hopefully some of what I'm doing is modeling stuff that will continue at home, so that even if it's kind of subconsciously modeling it for the parents, so that it cements it, so that it's all a scaffold of some sort, right?
Right. And it also helps to extend, you know, so that, as we were talking before, your remote sessions are much shorter than what their full day was. And it should be, because you didn't do large group all day long. You did it for a short period. And that's why your remote is much shorter. But it extends that day of the experience for the child, because now the parents are taking what they've observed you do and they're weaving it into the rest of the day, which is just, it's going to benefit the child and their relationship, and it's going to extend the experience and the benefit of preschool. So it's not just, they don't just get those benefits in the 25 minutes they're with you, they get that benefit all day long with their parents.
And that's our hope. Exactly. Like even in the instructions that I send home, I'll be like this week we read they will be reading coming up. I just recorded it. The book, My Heart is Like a Zoo, where they make, you know, animals out of hearts. And so I sent home a whole bunch of paper hearts in different colors and googly eyes, and they have glue and paper, and they need to make an animal. Well, that was a really hard thing to just be like, make an animal.
Right.
So I included at the end of it, I modeled it, and I modeled me changing my mind while making something. So I was going to make an octopus, but it was too hard. So I changed it and made a jellyfish. And I was trying to model the process, the creative process, that it's okay. I didn't like the way it looked, so I changed it. And my goodness, my stuff never looks perfect. And I specifically try to make sure it doesn't.
Right.
And then in the write-up, I say to parents, if your child wants to make an animal, cool. If they want to make just a collage of hearts, cool. If they want to make a car out of the hearts, awesome. The point of this is that they're playing around and manipulating a shape. It's spatial skills. That's what we're learning. So it doesn't matter if they don't want to make an animal. So, it's those little comments in the write-up of this is what the goal is. So don't worry about the specifics.
Yeah. And I love that you make that clear for the parents. Like, here is why we're doing it. Don't get caught up in the what so much. Let me help you understand the why. And we'll focus on that part. And I love in some of the activities that I've seen that you shared, that you've emphasized that when you give those examples, that you're not giving those examples or those models for the kids to look at so that they can make something like that. You're giving them to the parents so that the parents can see, oh, here's the process and here's the idea behind that and here's the why. And then don't set this down next to your child as a model, but for the parents to have a concept and then to move from that with the purpose of the why.
Exactly. I'm very anti samples.
Yeah.
It took me a while to get my, one of my coworkers on board with my anti-sample.
Right.
I'm always like, nope, we're not doing a sample. And for a while they were like, why? I'm like, nope. We want the kids, like, I'll give them, even when I do crafts, and I don't do a lot of crafty crafts in class. I know my blog has a lot of crafts, but that's really special time for one adult and a child to do together. But even when I do those, I'm like, and when I did the video of me making the heart animals, I said, your heart animals are going to look different than mine. These are just the things I'm thinking of. I want you to do what you're thinking of. And yes, I'm kind of the person. I will sometimes be like, we don't need that. The sample gets brought out and then somehow it gets sneakily put away. Like, oh no, where did it go? That's okay. We don't need it. I was very passive aggressive about it for a while. But I got to my goal.
It's always keeping the goal primary, right? Keep the goal in mind.
Keeping the goal primary. Yes, exactly.
Well, I know you, like I said, you've shared a lot of stuff on social media, and I'll make sure that I link some of those things. And one of the things I just really had a good giggle over, you shared on Instagram, that this is the first year in all of these changes and all the things that are new is also the first year that you've worn dry clean only clothes to school. Right? But in that Instagram post, you also shared just several pointers that I think were so helpful. And like I said, I'll link that so you don't have to go into all of those. But are there some of those that stand out the most for you that are kind of your takeaways of here's what we have to keep in mind? I think, like you mentioned, keeping your goal first and foremost and then adapting around that is one of those key things. But are there other things that are working for you that you feel like might help other teachers right now?
I would say probably the most important thing that I think about all the time is books. They need to be way shorter over Zoom. Even when, like, we've been Zooming now all year, and I was like, we can do a longer book. No, not necessarily. It was not good. Because it's just different. Like, it's just a different experience for the students. And so I have read a lot of board books this year. Because they're shorter. And the other thing is keeping them active. So things like if we do an alphabet book, I will ask the kids to clap really loud when they get to their first letter. Or when we are looking for a specific thing in the book, when you see the specific thing, shout it out just so they're more engaged, because over Zoom, it is less engaging. It just is.
Yeah.
And so I think that and trying to get them to stop, like really reading in a dialogic way, is a lot harder over Zoom. So I will stop and say stuff. And even in my read alouds that are recorded without a live, group of children, I will stop and say, wait a second, do you think blah, blah, blah? And sometimes my puppet will answer. That's why I have a puppet, is to help things, move along when children don't answer.
Mm-hmm. Smart.
And I think the other thing is trying to structure it predictably. So just like you do in class, have a predictable routine, have hands-on or movement every time in some way. Like today, I wasn't planning on doing a movement activity with my small group, and they were, I don't know what they all ate for breakfast, something that just kind of but it was not as active as normal. So I was like, get up, let's move, being able to have a toolbox with enough tools that you can shift if you need to.
And I know when we talked before, personally, you're mentioning, and I think this speaks to that sometimes when we get on Zoom, we shift in our brains to kind of this performance mode, like it's a TV show, and realizing that it's not. It's still, you can still stop and adapt and adjust and make changes, and to not get caught into that thinking that you can't change gears just because it's on a screen now, that you can still be responsive, that you need to make those changes.
Oh, for sure. Like yesterday, so we have a child of the week, and our child of the week gets to announce what the weather is. We all check the weather with our weather goggles, look out the window, and he was like, it's foggy. Well, I don't have a foggy picture for my little weather chart. So I was like, wait, stay right where you are. Miss Allie is running to get some paper. And I made, something that said foggy instead. And they got to see, it was great because they got to see that I was writing the word foggy. Mm-hmm. And so, it was modeling different literacy goals. So I think that really being able to be confident in yourself, like fake it till you make it.
Right.
Be there and be like, I am the best at this. The thing is that so many teachers feel like they have to change how they teach just because it's online, and you have to change the structure of it. You don't change you. Mm. And I think we get caught up on that. And being animated, you know me, I'm a relatively animated person in person too. But being really animated definitely does help, but that just gets them in the door. Mm-hmm. Then it's just the regular old teaching that keeps them, learning and doing what they need to do.
Yeah. So with all of these changes, is there anything that you would take away with you? Even, if we snap our fingers and everything goes back to normal tomorrow, wouldn't that be wonderful? But is there anything you would still take with you to do the same?
I don't know. I'm trying to think of that actually, as we are, considering our timeline as a school. I think probably the main thing that I would take with me is the parent connection, mm-hmm. specifically doing home visits. Definitely. That's exactly what it is. I can't believe I didn't think of that right away.
Well, Allie, thank you so much for taking the time today to share some of these insights with us. I know that the work that you're doing means so much, not just to the children and families that you're serving right now, but to the many teachers that you're supporting as well.
Thank you. I hope I can help.
Thanks again for listening to Not Just Cute, the podcast. You can find show notes at notjustcute.com/podcast/episode 41. There you'll find links to Allie's blog and informative Instagram feed, along with other interesting tidbits addressed in this episode. Show notes will also share a link to the free mini course covering the 5 keys to intentional whole child development. Head to notjustcute.com/podcast/episode 41 to get signed up and receive key resources to help you implement and advocate for developmentally appropriate, responsive early education. I'm Amanda Morgan. You can read more on my blog and sign up for the Not Just Cute newsletter at notjustcute.com. And follow me on Facebook. That's facebook.com/notjustcute. I'm also sharing some new things on Instagram, so follow me there at Amanda_notjustcute. Thanks for listening today, and as always, thank you for standing up for children and for childhood.